All right, that's our 2 minutes up. I think we've got everyone in for the duration. Welcome along. My name's Chris Ellis. I am a tech evangelist out of Nintex. I'm based in Melbourne. Looking at the attendees list, we've got people with all sorts of different .com, sort of everything in that you can imagine in the region. So welcome along wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon. So, Nintex for Office 365, Strong Adoption and Continuous Innovation webinar. Over the next 30, 40, maybe slightly longer, maybe slightly shorter minutes, I'll be taking you on a bit of a journey of where Nintex has been, what the work we've done sort of over the years, but also more recently, it's particularly in the feature run in the last 12 months on the Office 365 platform. We'll highlight some success stories within that platform. I know from experience that as customers and partners, you like to hear from our existing customers, and we've got 3 stories that we'll talk to as part of the content here today. Then we'll talk about how your feedback, specifically through the user voice channel and through our product management momentum, has actually driven our investments in the Office 365 product and continuous innovation for Nintex for Office 365. This includes delivering many of the most highly desired features that you have been asking for. Also things like our making Nintex far more reliable and robust by geolocated data centers as well. And the last thing we'll do is we'll take a look at a number of new and improved innovations and value-add features through by way of a demo, and that you're able to tap into today if you are a current Office 365 customer, and we can talk to how that trial process goes if you're not a current Nintex for Office 365 customer. As with all Nintex webinars, because you're registered, you'll get a recording of the session today. So if you do need to drop off for any reason, we will be following up with a content pack, and which will include the slideware as well. And I've got some videos that make up the slideware. So without further ado, let's kick off. So Nintex, Microsoft, back in June 2011, made an announcement that they were launching the Office 365 platform. As one of the top 5 Microsoft ISVs and also a global leader in workflow and content automation, here at Nintex we continuously delivered the power of that Nintex workflow platform, optimized ideally for on-prem. Many of you on the call will be a Nintex on-premises customer. And that had been in place for the best part of a decade up to now. As you might recall, Microsoft launched Office 365 in 2011, halfway through the year. And at this time, Exchange Online was the most widely used component. Many of you are using that. From our experience, that's definitely one of the first cabs off the rank for customers that are migrating into the Office 365 platform. And the adoption and usage of SharePoint Online had only just begun to be investigated at that point by what we had sort of seen resonating through the market. So, true to form, Nintex released the workflow platform for SharePoint on-premises 2013, when that version was released towards the tail end of the year, 2012. And we brought that desired workflow and forms platform from 2010 into on-prem 2013 within weeks of that release to market being made for SharePoint Server. Many of you from sort of survey that we've done recently, we still know that around 50% of you out there are still utilizing this platform to date in that on-premises 2013. A short while later, as part of the journey, Microsoft released what it called Next Gen, for next generation of Office 365, which included, in addition, the SharePoint Online cloud-ready functionality, adding a whole new set of SharePoint Online capabilities. So those Microsoft customers on that journey, they really began to take note of what Office 365 could actually do and began to adopt that platform as a cloud-first, cloud-only strategy, or as part of a hybrid solution with SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 2010. And with the feedback loud and clear from our customers that they couldn't make the move to Office 365 without Nintex Workflow, we launched Nintex for Office 365 in September of that year. Using the new SharePoint Cloud app model, the power of Nintex could be delivered to brand new audiences, redesigned as a native cloud solution, so not a full trust code on premises, but optimized for Office 365. This also ushered in for us a brand new subscription-based model of pricing as well. And this is something that's resonated now in the SharePoint 2016 version as well, is that we went to market very, very, very soon after the SharePoint 2016 SharePoint server go live as well. So since its introduction in September 2013, Nintex for Office 365 has enjoyed very strong adoption in the market and usage growth in parallel with the uptake of that SharePoint Online platform. Some of the numbers that we are actually able to sort of garnish from what we know of usage in there is, as of June 2017, on the Nintex Office 365 platform, we've executed over 35 million workflow instances, which is a huge number if you think about that in terms of sort of 4 years worth, however how many that actually works out at on a weekly or monthly basis. We're well, I believe that we have actually exceeded that number as well now that it's we're a few months down the track. We're also 3 times usage growth in just the last 12 months, and that's synonymous with the growth of the SharePoint Online platform as well. But here at Nintex, we've certainly seen that sort of hockey stick spike certainly in the last 12 months. The adoption and usage has tripled. So not just the new users, but also users that have been probably doing a bit of due diligence up until the last 12 months and really have accelerated the use of the platform. Far more of a mix of more and more customers are moving to Office 365, but also those existing customers that are developing more high-impact workflows with Office 365. 200,000 plus people have initiated workflows. That's those end users that are consuming a forms-based workflow initiation or a Nintex mobile-based workflow initiation. So they're benefiting from those time saves, better efficiency, improved business impact, and the agility that the Office 365 Nintex platform offers. But it's not just all about workflow. We've had over 20 million e-forms submitted using the Nintex Forms product as well. And with an average of about 34,000 people submitting a form each month, we are well on track to exceed 50 million executions by the end of the year, probably even in a shorter time frame from that. And I imagine if you're part of the Nintex marketing blitz, you'll certainly hear about when we reach that all-important number of 50 million workflow executions. So we do quite a number of surveys of customers. Our field marketing, corporate marketing teams do a great job of actually getting user stories from current Nintex customers. And one of those things that we really try to do is a productivity value back from them. Now, to put it into slightly more interesting terms, data has the data that we capture from those customer inquiries and surveys and interactions show that on average, each Nintex workflow execution will save an organization about 3 minutes. So that's every workflow that's actually being run will save on average 3 minutes. For business using Nintex for Office 365, this means that collectively we've saved you nearly 200 years of productivity gains. So if you put that into an FTE average salary sense of the term, we're certainly saving tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars each year. Let's look at some of those customer stories. So let's drill down a little bit, and these will be global. So we've got kind of 3 different stories from all around the globe, but they're all Nintex for Office 365 customers. The first one is Buckman. So Buckman is a chemical manufacturer based out of the US. Their mission, their goal was to, on this journey of cloud workflow automation, was to stay competitive, really, in an evolving digital transformation landscape, but also while delivering excellent customer experience, and they wanted to control their cost as well. So Buckman used Nintex Workflow for Office 365 to save them, on estimate, around $800,000 US in 2016. They automated their critical sales processes, and if we look at that in Australian dollar terms, given that I'm based here in Melbourne, that's actually over $1 million annually saved in AUD. They now associate the use of Nintex. Buckman Associates now use Nintex Mobile to record things like safety incidents whenever and wherever they're actually occurring, including attaching photography, so that incident reports can are actually more accurate and complete at that time. Similarly, Mitchell & Butlers, who are the UK's largest restaurant operator with around 1,700 locations, they've digitally transformed their business using Nintex Workflow and Nintex Forms for Office 365. Mitchell & Butlers eliminated the need for manual inspection forms and using more than 3 million pieces of paper every year. Their savings estimated out at around 23,400 hours of productivity saved, which was time better spent by location managers to focus on delivering the best possible customer experience, particularly in that hospitality sector. And if you look at things like the average UK salary, it's actually saving them annually over $500,000 Australian dollars. And the last one, a little bit closer to home, is the Naylor Love Construction Group, based out of New Zealand. They are a leading national construction company who adopted Nintex Workflow for Office 365 to automate their critical business processes initially, and center them around their health and safety and incident reporting, which was stored in SharePoint Online. Regulations that had been introduced by the New Zealand government actually meant that more risk and more accountability was associated to someone from all levels of the organization if negligence was believed to be the root cause of a lost time incident. Digitization went viral, but in a good way, and they've now got e-forms and workflow processes used across the whole organization, from that health and safety all the way to finance. They've actually replaced an existing help desk system using Nintex and Office 365. Also things like a fringe benefits tax exemptions form. So something quite unique, but they've used Nintex and Office 365 for that, as well as things like site management observations, which they tie directly into KPIs. Ultimately, Naylor Love have used this to ensure that they are sending their staff home safely at the end of the day, and that's something that you can't really put a price on. Those case studies are available on nintex.com under the resources and case studies link, along with far more. We know that you want to see what our customers are doing with Nintex. That's something that I get asked quite a lot by partners as well, that forms part of proposal collateral. So whether you're a partner or you're a customer, that resources and case studies section on nintex.com should certainly be your next visit after this call. So clearly, customers through partners or customers are doing great things with Nintex for Office 365. One of the other things that I wanted to highlight was the fact that we actually listen. We do listen and we act on your feedback on the importance to deliver performance, reliability, and critical features that you are actually depending upon to achieve your outcomes and get results. So over the last 12 months, as part of an improved feature run, we've actually delivered a number of key enhancements to the platform. Improved performance and reliability. So a real benefit of any cloud infrastructure is the ability to make improvements under the covers. to deliver better resilience, faster processing time, a more robust design engine, and for the millions of requests that we're receiving, whether it's forms or workflow or Hawkeye or mobility each day. So without interrupting the work that you do, which is associated with things like taking an on-premises environment down for an upgrade, for instance, we're able to do these essentially on the fly. So we don't need you to install any other product updates or patches. We expanded the geographic coverage. Now, particularly for our customers in Asia, we moved to far more data sovereign and geographically located data centers in which to surface the forms and workflow canvases. So we made Nintex for Office 365 available in Microsoft data centers closer to where essentially your Office 365 tenancy is hosted and your employees are located. So what that meant was that we improved the compliance with data sovereignty, as well as lower latency and far quicker load times. And we'll be looking at bringing more data centers on as usage increases. So certainly feedback that we're looking to grab as we sort of go on this journey with you is where we're seeing particular issues, whether that be with latency and lag, so we can really focus the efforts there. We delivered your highly desired features. So through the use of our Nintex user voice tool, which include, and I'll show this slightly later on, delivered by and driven by both continuous innovation roadmap internally, but also the feedback that you provide us. We delivered features that improve your experience when designing larger, sophisticated workflows. We supported your software development lifecycle practices, and we've made your forms far more robust and usable for your users. And we're only just getting started. So in the next coming months, more features will come on board as well. Things like scheduled workflows, conditional starts, improvements to the task and email response, and also a brand new connection manager will add to a list of capabilities that we've already delivered, which you can see below. And we'll talk in a little bit more detail about them in the next few slides in some demos. But as with everything, we appreciate your feedback. Your feedback is hugely important to us. And we capture that through our user voice tool. And I'll show you exactly how that can be used to help you, the customer, or you, the partner, influence our development roadmap going forward. But let's have a look at some demos. And the first that I want to show are how we've changed both the forms and the workflow canvases to improve your design experience. So we brought things into the Nintex for Office 365 Designer, like action sets, like collapsible actions, to help make life a lot easier for you developing those larger workflows. And we're going to look at some Nintex forms for Office 365 improvements as well. Things that you were asking for, support for managed metadata, for instance. And as we go through the brand new Forms Designer experience, responsive forms. So let's take a look at action sets and collapsible actions. So if you haven't seen Nintex workflow for Office 365, essentially grab through the SharePoint store. So we add an app from the SharePoint store, and then you add or get Nintex for Office 365 forms and workflows. So they will align, as we said, to the most relevant data sovereign or the most relevant local data center. And the workflow engine is available through the list ribbon. So now we're in the designer. What I'm going to show is just breaking out some of the functionality that we've introduced recently. The first one being action sets and collapsible actions. So we'll just drag in a parallel block here and add another branch. And what I'm going to do is throw in three task actions. Just to show, I'm starting to expand this canvas out a little bit from its width. So this is going to become, particularly if we introduce something like a state machine here, it would become a little bit cumbersome to be moving around, zooming in and out. So what we're going to do is actually add in our action set to actually house these particular branches. So action set available in the new canvas, drag that in. And we've got our expand collapse option as well. So these two were released in, I believe, last month. So they should all be there on your tenancies. Double check that. They're all part of the standard action set and collapsible actions. Now, if I've got an issue in my underlying group of actions that haven't been addressed, the little yellow exclamation mark is going to roll up into the collapsible action. And I'll know that something within that collapsed action set actually needs to be addressed as an issue. So pretty smart. We can also disable the whole action set. So enable and disable is something that we recently introduced for the Nintex workflow for Office 365 action set as well. So part of that sort of sanity check if you want to do sort of test runs with and without actions enabled or disabled. Configuring the action. So the action set actually replaces that elevate permissions app step. And you'll be able to actually run that particular action set with elevated app permissions as you were able to do in on-prem. And just showing the collapse and expand. So again, showing where that little issue exclamation mark is, and we're going to do that for all levels of the hierarchy within that action set. Little key up there at the action set shows that it's now being run with elevated permissions, so to help you identify that. Also, you'll notice that we're now within the canvas that we have updated the look and feel as well. So as part of that feature run, we've brought that in line with the SharePoint 2016 canvas look and feel as well. So next up, we'll look at the disable action, but we're also going to look at the multi-set variable, another excellent feature that was introduced to really help keep things quite tidy, keep things clean, and help that design experience. On the disable side, just a parity action. It was heavily requested on user voice. I'm just going to drag in two log to history lists, logging two messages, one that I do want to keep as part of my initial run. I'll disable this other one. You'll see that that action is now grayed out and it will be skipped on the next run of the workflow. But if we look at the parallel block, we've got a number of actions underneath that, and we're actually able to disable the entire group of actions as part of that enable and disable. And the next one that I'm going to drag through is the multi-set variable. It's the set workflow variable action that we've actually updated. So it's not a new action, but it's new functionality within that action. And it gives us the ability to declare multiple variables from within the same action. So really keeping things nice and tidy. This was actually a bit of a pain point for me when the first document generation action really came out. And anything that we wanted to declare inside a document generation run had to be declared as a variable. As you probably know, we've updated that functionality a lot as well. But the first time that came out, it meant that any value that you wanted to declare within DocGen, you actually had to declare as a variable. And when we were doing that in single actions, that meant that we had really large parallel blocks of workflow variable declarations. And now you can see I can just keep add variable to that single workflow action, and that's going to keep things really nice and tidy to me. And I'm adding just a few examples here of text or date, vars, and so on. So really nice functionality that the team have worked on just to make life a lot easier and to make that end experience a lot neater as well. So moving out of workflow and into forms, again, Nintex Forms, part of the ribbon. Again, it's a SharePoint Store application add. It's also, if you want to trial it, that's how you grab the trial for forms and workflow. So I'm going to jump into Classic first of all, because I will be showing responsive a little bit later on. But this is essentially the new functionality that we introduced around some button management, so extra configuration actions that we gave you as part of the button action. and they were save and continue, which was hugely requested, saving as draft, and actually bypassing the sort of the required functionality. And that doesn't kick off a workflow, it's going to save that as a draft. So if I select save and continue as my button action, it's actually now just going to save that form as a draft. We also introduced the redirect URL functionality. So if you actually want to dictate where your users are taken to after they save and submit, or after they cancel, we introduced that redirect. So under advanced, redirect URL, and we're going to be able to take them to a public site where we take them back to the root of the site collection, whether we want to take them to a specific list view, for instance, so on and so forth. And some nice functionality there, rather than have to sort of depend on what SharePoint has given us out of the box. The newest tool in the toolkit for forms is the Manage Metadata Control. Another heavily requested action that we brought in very recently is the ability to leverage the values that you have if you're using Manage Metadata and the term store in Office 365. So again, a drag drop control and a click to configure. So select your term set, and that term set is going to be available to you within the forms canvas. I don't have one set up on my Office 365 demo build. I probably should get one in there. But yeah, multiple values, another nice nice feature that was added to the Manage Metadata Control. All right. So brand new innovation holistically for Office 365 as well. So rather than the sort of granularity of some of those controls and workflow actions, there's been a lot of very large projects behind the scenes that have been going on here at Nintex as well. So the time to sort of project scope these out, deliver, and also sort of maintain that alpha beta feedback loop has been, you know, something that's been well rewarded in the feedback that we've had, and I'm sure you'll agree that the teams have done pretty phenomenal jobs in the last 12 months delivering all of these. So we're also excited to announce in the sort of last few weeks or last few months some high value and innovative capabilities for Nintex for Office 365. Responsive forms, and I'll show that in a second. The new design and runtime capability that's been a huge hit at InspireX, which was our user conference in February, eliminates the need to create separate forms and add custom CSS and JavaScript to have forms render correctly across all devices. Responsive forms takes the easy-to-use drag and drop design experience to a next level, delivering powerful and beautiful web-based forms in a matter of minutes. Nintex DocGen a real game changer for us on Office 365, particularly after the deprecation of Word automation services in the platform, was the ability to build on the richness of data-driven content automation previously available in DrawLoop for Salesforce, and we actually brought that functionality into Nintex for Office 365. So what document generation does, it lets you dynamically generate your high-impact documents, or any documents really, like contracts, sales proposals, licensing agreements, customer service response letters, any onboarding material, new user contracts for signatory, or literally any document package as part of a business process, but do that automatically within Nintex workflow with the knowledge that your document templates and your document storage is done in a best-of-breed document management system like SharePoint Online. So what this lets us really do is, I was at a conference last week in Sydney for the HR suite, well, the HR function, and really the majority of people that visited the booth that we had were still using paper-based forms, and they were still using manual processes, and the risk that is associated with that, particularly if it's end user information or new user or customer information, really is just not worth not having a solution like this in place. And when we showed what document generation, particularly in conjunction with an electronic signatory partner that we have like DocuSign or Adobe Sign, it really hit home that they can come kicking and screaming into the 21st century by implementing something quickly and easily using document generation. Nintex App Studio. So back in March, we released and rebranded Nintex Mobile Enterprise as Nintex App Studio. We added a new look and a new way to actually build line of business process apps for iOS, Android, and the Windows Phone platforms. We also introduced a new paradigm that we called custom content. It lets us go beyond just the mobilization of Nintex artifacts, allowing you to introduce things like documentation, imagery, HTML, and so on. So you can now incorporate things like your videos, any graphics you have, Office and PDF documents, as I said, custom HTML pages if you want a really nice looking home page for your Nintex mobile app. We can do all of that within the App Studio experience without writing a single line of code. And if you've ever seen me demo this in person, I have an app on my Android in under 10 minutes that's fully functional. It has offline capability, and it looks and feels like it was created for my organization. And finally, but certainly not least, is the Nintex Hawkeye analytics tool. We introduced this to enable you as an organization to get very powerful analytics and also process intelligence, to get visibility and also business insight into processes that you've automated in Office 365, but also usage and holistically what Nintex is actually doing in that environment. So in literally a couple of clicks, I think you can count them on one hand, you can transform a workflow and that forms data into a graphical dashboard. It makes life a lot easier when you're actually asked to not only provide the value of a software platform, but identify things like bottlenecks, lags, any inefficiencies in your current processes as well. Hawkeye may well be included for you today. You can certainly trial Hawkeye, and you can plug in your existing Office 365 environment in that 30-day trial to see exactly what it's all about. So back into the demos, we're going to look at a few things here that we've just mentioned. We're going to look at responsive forms. We're going to build a little app, or look at a little app build in App Studio. We'll look at the DocGen action at a high level, certainly more information available out there. And finally, we'll close with Nintex Hawkeye workflow analytics. So again, back to my list, and we're going to open Nintex Forms, but this time we're presented with the choice of Canvas. We're going to select the new responsive forms builder. So that's going to open up. Now that's a choice per content type on the list that you can make. So you can actually have a bit of a hybrid for different content types. And when the designer opens, you'll know that it is already a lot fresher. And one of the things that has disappeared are all those pixelated grid lines. So everything here is snapped to place, and it should make room for itself when you drag a control in. You can also dictate the width of certain controls on there. Anything up to 4 individual columns per row. So we can actually make this form much easier to use and build for our end users. Now the VTEs and partners that we had on the early beta told us that it was about 50% quicker to actually build a form. And we've done away with paneling as well, so you'll see dragging in a number of columns into an individual row will actually make the panel, and you can add the rules in the same way that you did in Classic to that panel of controls as it's appeared. What we're doing is just alignment, but also stretch skew, so 50, 25, 50, 75, or 100% widths. Dragging in a new column will essentially snap it in to place. And changing the name of that title will actually change the label associated. So again, we don't need to drag in separate labels for columns. The label is inherited as part of the actual control itself. Now we still have managed metadata. That's something that has come through as part of that build as well. So don't worry that we've not sort of deprecated that sort of functionality just because we've gone to responsive layout. But what we have taken out is the CSS option, and we've given you this new theme builder. If it looks familiar, That's because the premise follows on from what we've given you in App Studio. So you can still obviously put those hex codes in under your primary, secondary color schemes. And if I change the primary to blue, you'll see that that's the button clicks options here. Now my secondary, I'm going to make a quick tweak to this and make it a little bit darker than the gray, and we'll see where that flows on. That's the borders within that form. Obviously we've got the page color and also the form color as well as individual advanced styles. So we can actually still impart that level of granularity and styling, just doing it in a low-code, no-code way rather than rely on CSS and so on. We've introduced some new rules functionality which will be making its way into the classic mode as well, which is set values on controls. So when a specific form has a specific value, you might want to pre-fill another form control based on what that value is. So if in this instance I say that my title field has the value of Mr. when I input it, then what we can do is we can dictate something like a gender field to pick up male, female, for instance. Something pretty simple, but it shows you that capability of it's value-based rules in here. Still got the hide show, still got the validation, but this set value rule is something nice and new. Now, if you are an on-prem customer, you'll see responsive forms come in towards the end of September as well. Now also, we've done away with the layouts, which you'll notice has gone from the ribbon, but I still have that functionality to promote this form as a Nintex mobile view, and that's essentially just a checkbox which makes it a responsive form on the devices or on the Nintex mobile app that you select. Still got preview. Let's have a look at that rule. So if I type Mr. in here, it's going to pre-fill the single line of text that I had that rule applied on. So if you're a member of our Nintex community site, there was a blog very recently released for the Nintex Responsive Forms Builder. Take a look at that. It goes in a little bit more depth, particularly around the engine. If you have Nintex Forms just now for Office 365, then your app should be updated to the latest version. On to Nintex App Studio. I always find forms into mobile as a nice sort of segue. So this is the Nintex App Studio app builder. We're just going to create a little app here for a custom solution for my HR department. So I've got my Crisco app. That's got all the sort of corporate stuff on there. But I want to build one specifically for some of my HR forms and functions. Now we have issued Androids to our HR department. So we're just going to select the Android build, but that will still build a native app for whichever platforms you decide to build. So no more directing traffic to the app stores. We get the app definition and we can send that out over MDM. Within the connections, we've actually now got a centralized store of your connections, so you're not putting in that URL each time, and you can pre-select from them. And I'm now picking my logo work here, and that's for things like the tile on the phone or my About Us page and so on. Select my color scheme. So once we get down to the custom theme, this might look a little bit familiar within the Forms engine as well. But you can select one of our pre-built ones and tweak that, or if it's sort of good to go for you, you can just run with one of ours pre-selected, or you can actually customize your own. Again, we'll let you put your own hex code, color codes in there. Okay, so I think we've frozen here, which is not cool. There we go. And finally, the custom content. So this really is where the Nintex App Studio built app stands out from any other Nintex mobile functionality. And it gives us the ability to ring-fence the applications that live on that app. So as I said, I want this to be just for some HR functions. I'm going to include just 3 forms that I've built in the desktop designer and exported. And then I can start to add the content that makes this app really unique. So what I'm going to do first of all is add an HTML homepage. That's a splash screen that when you log into the app and you actually see that. That can include some clever things like some deep linking artifacts for calling, emailing, so on and so forth. Imagery can also live on that HTML form. You can actually use HTML to call workflows specifically if you're using things like external start. So button value on an HTML form could actually kick off a workflow. So some really clever applications that this could be used for. I'm also adding a PDF here. This is for my e-policy document. So I can actually embed my terms and conditions of electronic usage policy in the app itself so that my staff members have got that documentation wherever they are on the mobile app and offline. I've also given a scanner function, particularly with the URL schema functionality, being able to embed values into a QR code, scan them internally from the mobile app, and then have that auto write back to an Office 365 list is a very, very nice use case for things like those audit and checklist functions that you may well have today. Finally, save and build. It's going to package everything up, and as the originator, I'm going to receive that app definition that I can send over MDM to any remotely configured app, mobile phones, or I can send that via Nintex's over-the-air app deploy, so a distribution-based deployment method. So we'll take a look at document generation. So I'm back in my workflow example here, and let's say at the end of my workflow, I want to do some document generation. So I actually want to generate a document from all of the workflow values, the item properties, the workflow context that I've been capturing. It's a drag-drop workflow action. We're now in version 2 for Office 365. If you remember, back when we introduced this, we introduced document generation as pretty much a one-to-one. You could have one template which took your values that had to be variables as an output. So template document library selection, that is SharePoint Online. So we've got that version controlled, security trimmed document template there. And next up is we select our template name. I'm going to create a new one here from a PowerPoint, because I'd like this front cover to form part of my generation output. So what that's going to do is it's going to open that PowerPoint, Word, or Excel-based template, and it gives me the ability to store that template back in to the document library template that I've selected there. I'm going to set this one to always include, but I'll show you what we mean by based on a condition as well. So just in my other window, PowerPoint is kind of gearing up. It's getting warmed up and started. So let's just wait for that to kick off. And what we have also introduced as part of this document generation functionality is a thing called the Nintex Document Tagger, which is some really clever functionality that's actually tying back into what's available in workflow for us to add as essentially a merge value. So we've got table data in there, so that can come from a SharePoint table if you've added that table data into the actual document generation action, as well as imagery. But you'll see I've got access to all of my item properties here, whether they're core SharePoint item properties like the created, modified by, or if they're metadata that I've introduced as part of that workflow. I've also got workflow context, so things like the initiator, the site URL. So if you want to do things like report documentation at the end of a workflow function, particularly if you're using workflow for things like a help desk, for instance, we can take some of the date and timestamps from when actions have run and actually pull them into the generated document. We can also add styling to these tags so that when the workflow values and the item properties are merged into my outputted document pack, they're going to take the styling that I've told them to take as part of the tag. So let's insert that template. We'll add another one. We'll add one that's already in my document library here. Let's go back to my template documents library. I'm going to select one I've already got, but in this instance, I'm actually going to do the based on condition. You can imagine that there are many different conditions that a template may or may not be included in, and that could be sort of similar content but for different regional areas. I'll look at, for instance, our induction pack builds. We have a number of offices globally, and depending on the city that you've selected as part of your that's been selected for you as part of your onboarding, you're actually going to have a different document pack generated. It could be a credit card form for a new user. It could be a tax form if it's a US office versus anyone else. And we can actually include them based on a condition that has been selected as part of that workflow build. Next up, my output file name. So I'm just going to use some of the workflow context to generate a unique output file name for this. We don't need the file extension in here. That's actually going to be picked up by the generation type at the top. So it's going to add a .pdf to that. My output location, well, I'm just going to select the documents library on SharePoint. If I wanted to, I could add that as an item attachment. And finally, probably a good idea if you're going to take that document on into something like DocuSign or Adobe Sign is adding an output file URL, probably as a variable to make life a lot easier, but we can then reuse that variable if we're sending content on to an e-signatory or electronic file storage repository. And the last piece of workflow technology that I want to show is Nintex Hawkeye. So as part of the Hawkeye deployment, we gave you some new actions in workflow called Hawkeye beacons. One of these is a standalone beacon that we're going through just now, which is actually showing me how to expose more holistic data from a workflow up to my Hawkeye tenancy as a feed that I can then create visualizations on. The other is certainly a stage-based beacon, and this is where that granular reporting really comes into its own. So what we're doing is we're substaging this overall process with a beginning and an end beacon, and we're going to give those intuitive names. Branch 1, because it's in my first parallel branch, and an expected duration of 3 business days. So what we're actually now able to do is within that substage, really tweak that feed of reporting to only expose the values that I want to expose for that single task, for instance. We're going to match up the start beacon to the end beacon so that the values coming through are the same. And that's going to allow me, it's going to give me some parameter values that I can then use when I'm creating those visualizations in Nintex Hawkeye. You can see how in a stage-based workflow or a state machine-based workflow, this is going to make for an incredible visual reporting dashboard to see exactly where particular values and particular list items are within a process. If an employee, for instance, has been overloaded with tasks, if a lot of things have been rejected for a particular reason, these are all things that we can actually report on using Nintex Hawkeye beacons. I'm probably going to want a beacon that tells me exactly what my approval stage is doing as well. If that was in a state machine, that's going to become very useful to actually get reports on those 3 tasks as opposed to more granular. Now, if you're a current Nintex Office 365 customer, on Enterprise, you're able to add Office 365 quite quickly and easily. Essentially, just add an Nintex data source, add your site collection URL in there, and then authorize. And what that's going to do is start to expose data to a number of lenses that you can create. The first is the usage lens. That's going to give us some holistic reports and holistic values on what Nintex is essentially doing. So let's take a look at that usage lens for one that I've sort of pre-built. And we've changed the cards to this to make life a bit easier. You can even actually have little icons and imagery to really differentiate what those different lenses are actually for. And while this loads, so the Nintex usage lens is essentially surfacing data that's going to be important for people like your IT managers, your SharePoint admins, and so on. Now, we used Power BI embedded here. You can download the template locally if you want to flesh out these visualizations, change the parameters, and so on. And newly introduced is the expand dashboard. So if you've used Hawkeye up till a few months ago, it's kind of been in this slightly condensed view in a page, but we can now get full page real estate on this. So it's going to tell me how many workflows have been published in my organization. I get a look at the running instances, and this template stands up like this out of the box. So running instances, particularly important for adoption and trends. How many actions within the Nintex workflow suite are you actually using? That's a value for money dashboard. Task duration, so the start and end delta of a task. How long is that task actually taking to approve internally as a holistic organization? And also my participation within workflow as well. Finally, the Nintex return on investment. These are some industry figures that were provided to us by Forrester doing the total economic impact study of Nintex. We took those assumptions and we plumbed them into the Hawkeye tool so that every workflow that runs or is built, you can actually see a return on investment value. The other lens corresponds directly to a workflow or group of workflows that make up a process. This is the process intelligence lens and corresponds to those actions that we just pulled into workflow and the data that is being pulled in from that. So again, dashboard actions, we can download that Power BI template and create our own visualization, or we can leverage what Hawkeye gives us out of the box. And we can get far more granular reporting on an individual process and data in flight. So if we look at this example for contract management, we're actually able to see by contract amount exactly where the money is sitting within my contract management process. It's a simple workflow, draft and review, but I'm exposing things like contract type, contract priority, and obviously contract value. And by clicking into the different axes in the lens, I can actually see what that view of the world of my contracts management process looks like. Now we can pick up dates as well, and we can obviously, with the help of Power BI, introduce color-based coding on this, and we can really see where our issues lie within a process. We have a nice Bing Maps overlay as part of the lens, and we can really see from a regional or a national organization where individual requests, line items, and data is actually sitting, and where that has trended, dropped off, and any issues over time. If you recall, we had that expected duration line item in there. That essentially triggers a breach, and we can actually then report on how many times that has enumerated over as SLA reporting. And finally, the standalone beacons are going to promote the information that's important to me to report on in a lens. And I can then obviously link that to the other values that are being reported as part of that actual action. And finally, a return on investment for the individual process. This is particularly important if we've got things like same process across different business units, but it's different workflows. We can actually overlay the lens to see which one is actually getting us the best ROI as part of the tool. So in summary, and we sort of got just a few minutes left, we discussed customers and partners and customer success, certainly, that have designed and executed powerful workflow automation solutions. And it's clicks, not code with Nintex. All Nintex workflow solutions are essentially low code, no code. And we've looked at certain examples around health and safety, but we've more importantly looked at exactly sort of what those metrics have been, but also how you have actually influenced the product development that's happened in the last 12 months. And we showed all of those new features and new innovations. Things like responsive forms, document generation, Nintex Hawkeye, and the Nintex App Studio are those new innovations that we've brought to further increase your usage in Nintex for Office 365, but gain far better value for money in a Nintex business process automation platform. So just in closing, your feedback, and I've sort of alluded to this throughout, is extremely important to us. It matters, and we listen. We have a number of tools with which to give your feedback, one of them being the Nintex User Voice product feedback tool. Nintex.uservoice.com, what I'll do is I'll actually drag that in and show you exactly how this works. You log in. This gives you a number of votes that you can actually impart on certain pieces of information. Let's jump into Office 365 workflow. One of the really important things to do in this, you can obviously raise your own. If you've had issue or you've seen another tool do something clever and you want that included in the next consideration for development. But have a look at what's actually open for voting. Your votes are important and it's actually really important that you get the most out of those votes. As you see, we can actually add votes to these, and any that are open for voting are actually in front of a product management team at the moment. So what we can do is scroll down. Let's look at one that I haven't voted on. This one's actually in, we just need to update that. But let's do the copy list item, and I'll add 2 votes to that. If you find something in here, there may already be a workaround that's actually been published while we wait to develop that action. Let's add another vote in here. And obviously we have Nintex forms for Office 365 as well. And again, any that are currently open for voting, your votes will certainly increase the likelihood of those coming to fruition. I've added 1 vote. Let's add 3 for my user profile lookup. That's a really important one in forms. So nintex.uservoice.com. I'd love to see everybody that's on the call today actually log into that. Give us your feedback. What should we build next? Let's set field values for rules, for instance, or multi-page forms. This is a great tool. We do listen. If you are struggling with feedback on the user voice tool, by all means let us know. Talk to your local tech evangelist, so whether that's KK up in Asia or sort of the Hong Kong-based SE that we've brought on board, or myself if you're in Australia, New Zealand. But give us your feedback. Any issues you're having with user voice, please yell out. And I'm just around the corner from product management, so I can get that word straight from the horse's mouth. The other tool is community. So probably the most valuable resource that we have as far as self-serve is the community tool, community.nintex.com. It's a forum. There's a lot of valuable information in here. Whether you want some product info, some install info, some generic Office 365 help, if you want to play in the gamification space, if you want to see what's new, take part in the August mission, for instance. But there's a lot of incredible content on here. If you've had to Google or Bing search an issue that you're having in Nintex, the chances are that a community link will be top of the list when you actually get those results. So all that's left for me to do today is thank you all very much for your time. I really, really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to listen. Any feedback that you have on the tool, we're always here to listen. Reach out to your local TE, Tech Evangelist, or your local territory manager. We'll do our best to answer your questions. If we don't have the answers, we certainly have the ability to deep dive into the amazing members of staff at Nintex that we have, whether it's product or whether it's a sales and licensing question that you have. Don't be shy. Reach out and we'll get you the help that you need. Thank you very much, folks. Have a phenomenally productive rest of the week, and you'll get the content pack soon. Thank you.